Okay, so today we're going to start with market failure. This connects to the uh, welfare theorems, or let's say general equilibrium, that we learned in the following way. We ended with the fact that we can connect three things. Number one is perfect competition. Number two is Pareto efficiency. And number three is, so that is the last part, that is our social welfare. Now, I said that if we extend or if we move forward from this line, we will reach something called a social choice theory, okay, which is a huge branch, and you won't find it until it appears in masters. So, for the time being, this is the part that we are going to leave at the level we reached. Okay. So then perfect competition and Pareto efficiency. When we studied the welfare theorems, typically the first one, because in that one we explicitly mentioned that in our assumption, so in our assumption of welfare theorems, we said no externality. No externality. And the reason of explicitly mentioning this word is that if there is or if there are externalities, then this relationship, this nice relationship, it breaks down. It breaks down in the sense that even so the nature of the relationship breaking down is important. So even if I have perfect competition, okay, efficiency is not guaranteed. Efficiency is not guaranteed. So that's the problem that we'll face. And this is huge because you see, first we derived or constructed the theory and derived the efficiency conditions. And we said that apart from the fact that there is a serious lack of equity concern, efficiency is something that we want. And then we said that perfect competition is the only system which can guarantee it. And we assumed it and we derived everything in general equilibrium quite easily. But here is externality which says that if this is present, then you can't do anything. And in today's world where climate change is a serious issue, okay, where a lot of animals, they have, or birds, they have become extinct. Externally, climate change is a huge, externality itself is a huge concern. Okay. All right. So, but first we are going to start understanding what market failure is, because externality as a problem, it comes under market failure. Now, technically speaking, market failure is basically in different forms. Okay, so market failure in essence is basically a lot of things. One is obviously when this efficiency is not guaranteed. So efficient allocation or production is not possible. So this is one scenario. And the other, which is obviously related to this, is more dangerous, that is non-existence or incomplete market. Okay. So these two, they are the scenarios whom we call market failure. Now, what can be the reason? There are two reasons for which market failure can occur, and the effect of one of those, you have studied the effect of one of those in quite detail, but we have not used the term market failure, we just said something else. So the first reason of having a market failure is this. So one can be the suboptimal one can be suboptimal market structure. Okay, so by suboptimal, we mean something which is failing to reach Pareto. So its example, what are these examples? We are talking about any market form or any market structure other than perfect competition. Okay, and it is readily understandable, because if you assume anything apart from perfect competition, then the efficiency requirements will not be fulfilled at the equilibrium. Now, what are the examples? It basically includes all the market structures that we have studied till date other than perfect competition. So definitely it will include markets like monopoly, right, which specifically include scenarios like natural monopoly, which are definitely suboptimal, definitely inefficient, but a kind of inefficiency that we can't really ignore. Okay, so natural monopoly, then obviously price discrimination, and then comes all the other structure like oligopoly. Okay, so then comes market structure like oligopoly. So anything which is different from perfect competition, okay, that fails obviously to yield an equilibrium which is Pareto optimal. And because of that, always we have compared the the surplus generated by these markets at equilibrium with that of the perfect competition. But in those chapters when we studied monopoly, oligopoly, we never explicitly said basically that this is an example of market failure, because in our standard terminology or standard colloquial, we don't use these scenarios, we don't call them as market failures, we call them as suboptimal market structure. But obviously in some sense they are market failure. See, the point is that the efficiency is not guaranteed here because there is no perfect competition. The second reason that we're going to talk about, in here there will be entities or scenarios where you will have perfect competition but you will not have efficiency. Okay, so we're interested in this. So what are the problems? The second reason is lack of internalization. Okay, if I put in simple words, this basically means whose responsibility is that. So lack of internalization of costs and prices, sorry, costs and benefits. So costs and benefits in determining prices. So much the way the market price doesn't really reflect marginal cost in here, here also the market price does not reflect the marginal cost, but there is a difference. The difference is this: here the price does not reflect the private marginal cost, but it reflects something else. Okay, so we had this idea of markup, Lerner's index, power of a firm, and all that. Here we actually have two different kinds of cost, and the price reflects the one of them, and that is the private cost, but it doesn't reflect the social cost. Now, generally, there is this idea that externality somehow has an underpinning of a negative kind of a meaning. Okay, it's not true. Also, generally, when we give examples of externalities, we are very fond of giving negative examples. Okay, because somehow there is an idea that okay, it is the negative effect that concerns us more than the positive externalities. It's really not so. But in terms of the economy, in terms of real world speaking, the problems are more faced when we started to tackle negative externalities. Okay, and the logic is very simple. The logic is everyday logic. Is that when everything is going good, no one really cares, and whenever something goes wrong, then you find all the talkings and proceedings and everything. So That's why generally we are concerned about negative externalities, and we have really bad examples when you talk about positive externalities. We hardly find anything other than gardening, planting trees, and all of that, all of those. Okay, but there are very good scenarios actually. Anyways, so our current interest, as I said, is not on this market structure because we know them. Our current interest is in the market failures, which occurs because of this lack of internalization. And with this lack of internalization, this phrase, lack of internalization, we will introduce a phrase which is very famous, which is called property rights. Property rights is something which was not conceived in older days. For example, if you go to I don't know, tribal societies, okay, it can be Native American or Native Indian, it doesn't count really. But in there, the concept of property rights is not there. But as you may know or may not know, the concept of property right is very, very important in capitalistic structure. Okay, and it generated with people who are called physiocrats. Okay, physiocrats. So they were very they are very supporter of this idea of property rights. Okay, and one of the backbone of today's form of society is private property rights. Okay, this sense of private ownership, which leads to a lot of things. Some things which are good to some extent, and some things which are kind of not that good. Anyways, so our current interest first of all is externality, and I generally use the acronym CPR. It's basically common property resources. Okay, common property resources. Okay, if you're ever interested in kind of Indian societies, and not the newer ones, but societies which were present in olden days. There is a book on economic history of this country by Tirthankar Roy, which is very famous and very well written. He is a very well writer actually. So he wrote a lot of things. He wrote on at large on a lot of things. And all of them are connected to economic history of India. Okay, but there is a book which is named under economic history of India, and there is a chapter. I think it is still there. At least in our time, it was there. There is a chapter called the Commons. Okay, the Commons. If you're interested, you can buy this book. It's kind of an asset to someone who is studying economics. Read this chapter, the Commons. Okay, it's very important today. We and for a long time it has been a fashion to talk about tribal rights, forest rights. Okay, and we do it at times just to show that even we are far away from forests, and we don't really go there unless it's a long weekend. We are still concerned about those people. So the life of them and the economic aspects of that life of its connection to natural resources, that is very connected to this common property resources. Okay, and obviously it will come under ideas of market failure, because you see it explicitly says common property, which is in direct contrast with what I just said, that is private property. Okay, all right, so CPR, common property resources, resources which is used by an entire community, a village, or things like that. Okay, it can be used for different reasons. For example, in Kolkata, one of the famous use of of land with no ownership is to throw garbage. So that's one of the use of empty land that we have found in this city. There are obviously other better uses. Anyway, so it includes a phenomenon called tragedy of commons. Okay, tragedy of commons. So everybody who is in quarantine, some of them individually, they are thinking, what is the harm if I leave this place and go home and all that? Or one individual is thinking, let's call a party, and that is becoming a tragedy of commons, because then we are having second wave and a host of commitment zones and all that. So that's the idea of tragedy of commons. Okay, everybody is thinking, what was the harm in it? And then that becomes a social massacre, something that that the very well demonstration of this is the current United States. Okay, 60,000 infection per day. So that's the tragedy of commons. Okay, and then comes free riders. Now, free riders is a very easy idea. It's a very easy idea. The idea is very simple. All of you kind of know this. You wake up at around 5 or 4:30 in the morning, right? You will see somebody or some individuals with some long kind of bamboo sticks, or probably trying to cross your fence and trying to get some flowers, plucking flowers from somebody else's home. That is called free riding. It's like you plant a tree and it gives flowers, and then someone comes and just plucks because it's free. No one can really charge, and there is no method by which you can charge. All right, but obviously there are severe consequences of this free riding problem. But what I'm trying to show you here is that these problems, they are not very they're not bookish in that sense, that when you have to understand, you have to open a book and read, okay, this is tragedy of commons or something like that. They are everyday problem. They are always present, and it is sensible to think that way, because perfect competition itself is not present really. So obviously, when we talk about the problems that are involved in a system which fails to be kind of efficient, given it is competitive, there are a lot of examples from real life, and it is better that you understand all of this from real life, because otherwise it becomes very problematic. Okay, you have to make up a lot of things when you will be writing on these things. Anyways, and it is also always easier to understand if you can connect it to your life. Okay, so then comes non-existence, as I said, or incomplete markets. You see, the reason I'm talking at length about all of this is that this is something that you have not studied till this point, and also the treatment. Okay, it is not really the kind of treatment that you have given to the earlier chapters. Okay, so here, regarding non-existent incomplete markets, there is asymmetric information. Okay, so one of the famous example is buying a second-hand car, where you as a buyer you don't really know as much as the person who is selling it. Okay, so there is always a rightful possibility of lying, of someone lying to you. Okay, so that's asymmetric information. So when the buyer and the seller they do not possess the same amount of information regarding the objects at exchange. Okay, then comes adverse selection. Adverse selection. What is this? This is basically rational thinking leads to a kind of selection which actually kind of destructs the market. All right. So the famous example of this is when someone is coming up with an insurance. Uh, those people are more. Those people will be more willing to buy that, who are more prone to problem. So, for example, a new health insurance on critical diseases, that is cancer, HIV, okay, okay, that kind of health problems. So let's say critical insurance for critical diseases, it appears in the market. Now, what we are saying is that the people who are more willing to buy such an insurance are the people who are also highly more probable to get that disease. All right. So it's something like buying health insurance becomes more meaningful. Kind of making this kind of a statement that buying health insurance becomes more meaningful when you are older. Okay. So that leads to adverse selection, because that leads to higher premiums, and better insurances, they leave the market. All right. Then comes moral hazard. Moral hazard is very simple. The example is quite famous. The example is this: you buy an insurance, and just because you have an insurance, you become more reckless. So the idea is this: you have a car, you buy a car insurance, and you probably have a life insurance, and these two insurances, they just make you more reckless or rash driver, because now you have insurance. So if anything happens, you will get the money. Okay. So to avoid that kind of problems, there are a lot of clauses and all of those things. Okay. And if you, I don't know if you have handled ever insurance agents. If you handle, after insurance claims, then you'll see that they are not very they're not very supportive when you are asking for claim. Okay. One of the reason is that it involves these kind of problems where the person who is actually compensating, okay, the insurance agency, it lacks the observation ability which will allow it to legitimize the claims made by somebody. Okay. So there is an observation problem, monitoring issue. Okay. Okay. Then comes principal agent problem. We will just touch one one very simple problem of this issue, principal agent problem. It is because there was once in the Delhi School of Economics, there was a question on principal agent problem. Okay. And this idea is also simple. It's like, when you are, it's very easy. It's something like this: say you are going to construct a house. Okay. And you are so you have to hire some laborers. Now you are a person who doesn't really know anything about constructing a house. Then how will you guarantee that you can actually trust the laborers to do their job efficiently? Okay. So they can take the money and they can just be lazy, or they can just work slowly, and you will be in no way you can you can contest that they are being lazy, or they are being inefficient. It's because you don't know. Okay. So this is also a monitoring problem, but of a different nature. Okay. This also the famous problem, although the example of principal agent problem that is generally be that is generally given, is that some landlord is employing kind of agricultural laborers, and they are making a contract over how the payment will be made, but in no way the landlord is being able to monitor whether the laborers are working hard or not. Okay. So in that case also you will have a problem. Okay. And last but very important is this one: public good. Public good, which underlies two characters. Number one is non-exclusive, and number two is non-rival. Now, the famous example of public good is basically one of the famous example is the army, is the Indian Army, and we will go into that. But first, we'll look into what this non-exclusive and rivalry and all that it means. Okay, so before that, as I said, that currently we are interested in externality. Okay, and while discussing that, we'll also talk about exclusivity a bit. Okay, so how does externality arise? How does it appear? It appears as a side effect. Okay, it appears as a byproduct. Okay, so you don't generate externality by yourself. Okay, it's just a byproduct that generates as a byproduct of productive activity or consumption. Now, up to this part, this is all fine. So we're talking about kind of generating smoke when you are running a manufacturing plant, probably, or generating smoke when you are driving a car. Okay, we're talking about those things. So it appears as a byproduct of productive activity or consumption. Now, there are two things. Number one is and affects the production or consumption of others. This is what makes it important. Okay? So it's not really that if you generate a byproduct, that itself is problem. The problem is that it affects the production or consumption of others. And as long as that is not happening, that is fine. But also there is a catch. The catch is this: if you don't complain, how will I know that it actually affecting you? So, for example, when when pollution affects human beings, okay, it is known. I mean, it is well known because human beings can complain in a term which they understand. But let's say you have a factory which is polluting, but the nearby entity which is being the victim is a forest or a river. Okay, some entity which cannot really protest or talk in your term. Now, if that becomes true, then although there is externality present, it will not be really observable unless it creates a problem to human society. Okay, this is the kind of thing that happened really with climate change. So it was not a problem when kind of British smog killed fish in London. Okay, but it became a problem because it killed human beings also. Okay, now we are talking about environment and the externality of our activities on it, because now it is causing problem for us. The number of cyclones has increased and it will increase in the future. Okay, and in no way in modern cities you can save yourself. The basins, the delta regions, they are now slowly going into the sea. Okay, and the Western Sea, the Indian Ocean section of this country, which was very well settled, that okay, whatever happens, it will happen in Bay of Bengal. Now they are also looking at not so good prospect. Okay, so understand this aspect of externality. So only when it hurts the human society, it becomes important. So what I'm saying is that externality can be present in many forms, but unless someone is there to speak about it, that doesn't really become a discussion, and we don't go for finding solution of it. Okay, so there is this problem. Anyways, but for the time being, we are saying that, and we are saying that this happens. Okay, so it affects the production and consumption of others, and it occurs because, as we said, that lack of property right. So one of the reason, and we will extend it to study Coase theorem. So reason is lack of property right. Now you can say that there are other reasons than this, but what we are talking about while we are saying lack of property rights, I'm saying that consider a garage, okay, which is beside a river, because successful operation of a garage, it requires a water body nearby. So now it pollutes the water. Okay, now our question is, who owns the pollution of water? That's what we are talking about. That's the kind of property right, the ownership we are searching here. So for example, our dear Ganges, it has, I think, 42 factories in its line in Bihar and West Bengal, okay, and they pollute obviously, but it has around 400 and something factories in Uttar Pradesh itself. So, and obviously it pollutes a lot. Now, why does government comes in or NGOs come in to clean the river? Why it doesn't happen that even 1 out of 5 prays to the Ganges and looks it all and click photographs and all of these things? They do all these things, but they are nowhere close to even talk about cleaning it. Okay, it happens, what you're saying here, that it happens because we cannot identify that individual who polluted the water. Because if we could have, then we could have proceed. Then we can proceed with with further actions. But as long as we can't do it, we can't solve the problem. See, what we'll try to understand this. The reason of talking about this to such an extent is that we are here to find a solution. Okay, we are not here to boast about the problem, but the thing that we are talking about is the aspects of inability that doesn't allow us to find a solution. Okay, so so another example would be kind of who owns the polluted air in city. Okay, right? So you have quite old trucks, you have quite old buses which pollutes the city and which increases the temperature, the sulfur and all of these things. But given an area and given its SPM, that is suspended particulate matter, you cannot really associate it to some kind of bus. So that's why government comes in and it says that, okay, you cannot drive if the vehicle is 15 years old, all right? You have to maintain the BS4 norms and all of that. Okay. Now, obviously, it's a question to us whether applying these norms actually reducing the problem. Okay. That's up to us to answer this. Okay. So now we will go to 2 other words. Number 1 is non-exclusion. Now, this is something which is very easy to understand. So non-exclusion basically means that you cannot exclude the person from consuming the same. So can't exclude another guy, another person from consuming the, not really object, the commodity, okay, that I am consuming. Or to put it in much simple words, so fail to restrict access. Okay, so fail to restrict access. So that's something that you cannot do. And what is the, I think the closest example of, how non-exclusion leads to problem is Darjeeling Mall. Darjeeling Mall. Okay. So the first time I went there in Mall, it was in, I think, 2001 or 2. And the place was near empty. And when I went again, I think in 2013, it took 10 minutes to recognize that I'm actually on the road which leads to the mall. And the reason is that the mall is a place where you cannot really restrict access, where anyone can go given the other person is going. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that we are talking about here. All right, so obviously the example is obviously community park. So you go there and you feel it is crowded, but you fail to ask people out to go outside. Okay, now what is rivalry? What is rivalry? Rivalry is that the mere fact that I am consuming restricts others from consuming it. And the example, these are very trivial. Okay, the easiest example is an apple.